with a diagram that go in the Western religions, and similar to what duality religion of Hinduism is that God is a separate entity, an universe, and soul, individual soul, are subservient to the God, which is a classical religion well known to the West and also part of the Hinduism. Now, this is unique that we talked about, is that the God or Brahman, as we define in Hinduism, includes universe and the soul, individual soul. So when the individual soul looks at it, he will realize or she will realize is that I am nothing but God. So I exist within the God, or God is pervasive in the entire domain of the universe, which is a unique concept of Hinduism called Advaita Vedanta. What are the most common misconceptions in the West? That Hinduism is polytheistic, and we'll talk about individual ones. That Hinduism believes in idols. Hinduism is equated to casteism. It is more paganism, and it believes in fatalism and karma. And we'll talk about some of those. First of all, as I explained earlier, is that the concept of religion and the concept of dharma are two different concepts. You are putting a square peg in a round hole. Dharma cannot be pigeonholed into a religious concept, for the simple reason is that dharma is an inclusive phenomenon and religion is a theological phenomenon. And religion is primarily geared to teaching of a prophet, whoever the prophet may be. And dharma doesn't have any such concept. It is a teaching of many, many rishis over many, many thousands of years. Rishis were the saints and the avatar who are believed to be direct descendant of Godhead into this universe as we know. Now, one of the problem with the polytheism versus monotheism, which is a common problem in Western literature, which denigrates polytheism, came because of the fact is that Western Christianity emerged from what is called paganism, where Greek population had hundreds of gods, and Christianity came to conclude is that this is false belief system, and they came to conclude that there is only one God. What is not understood in the West is that one God can manifest in many different ways. Let me give you a simple example that is seen in the Western world, is that when we talk about government, depending upon how you view it, government can be president, government can be House of Representatives, it can be Senate, it can be Supreme Court, it can be state government, it can be city government or county government. So when one talks about government, we are not talking about one individual entity. We are talking about many, many different entities. So what is understood in Western concept of polytheism is similar to the concept of government per se. But we know that government as one entity controls everything, but government is not one person. The president controls a lot of different things, but he doesn't do it by himself. He has a cabinet which deals with different departments. Same way, a monotheism and polytheism are not mutually exclusive. Looking from bottom up, it is a polytheism. Looking from top, it is monotheism. From president on, it looks monotheism. But when you look from the bottom, you have many, many layers of hierarchy before one reaches to the monotheist concept of presidency. And that is the basic difference between monotheism and polytheism. And one more important thing, what is transcendental phenomena of Godhead manifests himself or herself in an empirical phenomenon of many different things. So one God has evolved into millions of gods within the empiric phenomena. And let me give an example. in a classical text of Upanishad, it is mentioned is that there are how many gods were, the question was asked, how many gods exist? Initial answer was 33 million. So how many gods really exist? Next answer was 33,000. So how many gods really do exist? 3,000. And then eventually one. So the point is that looking at a different way, one can see that ultimately all of them merge into one. So what it appears to be polytheism is not necessarily polytheism. It is one entity that has manifested into many entities, millions of them. So when Hindus think of many God, they know that intrinsically it is one that is manifested as many. Most commonly understood or mentioned in the West is 3P: polytheism, poverty, and population. I'm not going to talk about poverty and population. 3Cs: caste, cow, and curry. We'll talk about caste and cow. Curry is something that you will love to eat, but I'm not going to talk about it. And I is for idolatry, and S is for sati. Sati is a social custom. I'm not going to talk about that. Idol worship. First,
No, okay, go ahead.
Mahatma Gandhi said that I am an idolater and iconoclast, which basically means that I believe in idol worship, but I don't necessarily believe in idol worship per se. And anyone who believes that the murti or idol should be destroyed are essentially adhering to fanaticism, because they believe is there is only right way, and that right way belongs to their way. So depending upon your mental attitude, one can pray the idols or one can pray to an abstract idea. And it essentially means same thing. But if you get married to an idea that only abstract idea is good, essentially you become fanatic in removing the idols, which doesn't help at all. And that's the key. Symbolism, and this is most important thing. Idol worship is a part of human nature. I do not consider idol worship to be sin, which is commonly expressed in Western religion. Images are aid to worship, this is what Mahatma Gandhi wrote some 100 years back. And also he said something similar. It depends upon the attitude of the individual who is worshipping the God. In which form is the individual choice, or formless is a matter of individual choice. It has nothing to do, and let me give a simple example. When one talks about Statue of Liberty, we know that liberty is not directly connected to the statue. The statue can be destroyed, the freedom and liberty will not be destroyed. But if statue was destroyed, the mental anguish of losing that will be felt in the heart. Though the freedom that we enjoy in America has nothing to do with that idol per se. So Statue of Liberty is an idol. It has nothing to do with the freedom or liberty, and that's important. So when I talk about the idol of Krishna or Ram, I know that one can destroy that idol. It has nothing to do with the divine principle that resides within it. Let me give you a simple example. If I throw away a Bible in the trash, to a Christian, it will feel like insult. The Bible can be manufactured and printed thousands of times. One individual book has no value per se, but somehow mental pain or mental attachment to that book is similar to what the mental attachment to the idol is. So idol worship has nothing to do with believing that God resides and the God and idol are same. It is the understanding that divine principle is manifested into that idol, and we are praying that idol as a form of Godhead in some way, and that's important part to understand. Idol worship and ideal worship. We recognize Brahman, which is all manifestation, and we don't necessarily are worried about the physical characteristics of that idol. We recognize that idols are mental images of an abstract idea. We recognize that the ultimate reality is not necessarily same as idol, but that reality we pray to is residing into the idol of our choice, and that's called Ishta Devta. One of the common issue about in the West is what is yoga. What yoga is so widely used in West, but actually yoga means joining with the divine principle. So the effort and the mental discipline one cultivates to join the divine principle is the process called yoga. So yoga has nothing to do with the physical exercise that most Western people appear to understand. Though it is a preparatory for joining process with the divine principle, it is not directly connected to the exercises that we do in the West in the name of yoga. What is karma? Karma, as I explained, is that any thought, will, action that we do has a direct consequence in its result. So it's basically action and reaction chain. Once you act upon, there is always going to be reaction, and that is the law of karma. It can be misused in the sense that bad situations can be justified on the ground that it is all your karma. But idea is that we must act in a manner that the outcome of your action results in good karma. And outcome is what you expect it to be. And there are three kinds of karma, and I'm not going to go in detail about that. One of the common issue about we learn in growing up in childhood is we learn religion or dharma through the history called itihasa. Now that itihasa is not necessarily history per se. It is a combination of myth along with the history. So the stories of Lord Rama and Ramayana, stories of the war that happened in Mahabharata, and Gita was part of that Mahabharata story. And Purana, which is Srimad Bhagavat, which is a story of Lord Krishna's childhood. All of those things are explanation and understanding of abstract principle into the history books. So one learns by reading those books and the stories, the abstract idea that lies underneath the religion or dharma, as we call in the East. So it is not necessarily myth that it never happened. It is not necessarily history in the sense there is a clear actual evidence of that. It's a mixture of myth and history together. So some event that happened which has metamorphosed into itihasa as it happened, with many other additions added to the actual events. Some of it is manufactured, some of it is true. Many of the people in West have seen this kind of pictures of a woman sitting on a lion and often with the red tongue protruding and many hands and many things in different hands. All these have a symbolic meaning of action and inaction, desire, lust, how one destroys them. So the whole stories that were written about goddesses is essentially how one can circumvent the lust and the desire and turn your attention to the Godhead. So all these stories are written in a way a common person can understand. It may look exotic to a Western audience, but it has a direct connection to the abstract principle that Hinduism teaches. Universalism. Rig Veda said something like, truth is one, but sages speak of it in many different ways. Now, when Christ said, I am the way, the truth of, and the life, no one can come to Father except through me. And Krishna said, he who sees me in everything and everything in me is never separated from me, and nor I am separated from him. The question comes down to I and me. Is it a literal idea or is it an abstract idea? Most of the liberal Hindus will think it's an abstract idea. When Krishna says me, he doesn't necessarily me as an individual named Krishna, me as a divine principle. When most of the fanatics look at it, they will view I and me as a literal sense. It's that no one else except me. Most of the Hindus will think in terms of me essentially meaning a divine principle that resides in Godhead. It doesn't necessarily get confined to one entity called Krishna or Ram. It could be Buddha, it could be Christ, it could be Muhammad. It does not matter to an average Hindu. Caste system is also one commonly castigated in West. But simple explanation is in West, we have a blue collar worker and white collar worker. Essentially, same thing is stated in Vedas. And Rig Veda said Brahmin was his mouth and his both arms were Rajanyam was made, thighs were Vaishya, and Shudra were produced from the feet. Essentially, what he's talking about, intellectual class, administrator and military class, businessman, and labor class. So 4 classes were created to understand is that all of them emanated from one ultimate Purusha. So all of them were part of one entity of Godhead with a different function allocated to them in the society. They were not necessarily superior or inferior, but over the centuries, it happened if the social ill took over and brought it down to highest category and lowest category. Essentially similar to how Christian Bible was used to justify slavery and segregation for white race dominating over a black race. So nothing different. It is not directly connected to Christianity. It is a social custom. So same way, casteism is not necessarily directly related to the religious scriptures, but to the social strata and social structure that emanated over thousands of years. Salvation. Sin, surrender, salvation, and resurrection are the true inner nature and are the key to avoid the inner nature of sin. The problem is that Hinduism does not accept sin as the ultimate, as the primary reason we suffer. The reason we suffer is because we have lost track of our own divinity because of ignorance. Once you remove the ignorance, your divine nature will manifest itself. So there is no primal sin in Hinduism. There is only ignorance which prevents us from joining with God. 4 ways to get salvation: path of knowledge, path of devotion, path of action, path of meditation. One can choose any one of them or all of them and will lead to salvation. Most commonly used path is path of devotion, which is common to all religion, but rest of them are equally valid in Hinduism. Vivekananda said, I think that is the key of what Hinduism is. Each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest this divinity within by controlling nature, external or internal. You can do all those things, work, worship, psychic control, and philosophy, and you will reach the salvation. The dogma, rituals, books, temples are nothing but secondary detail. And the whole religion consists of work, worship, psychic control, and philosophy. Rest of the stuff is just secondary detail. So Hinduism does not get hooked on to specific dogmas and rituals. They are essentially a tool to train your mind to reach the level of salvation. but they are not prerequisite to do any of them is not necessary. Interfaith concept, this is what Mahatma Gandhi wrote, and I think that summarizes the key aspect of Hinduism. All religions are true. All religions have some error in them. All religions are almost as dear to me as my own Hindu religion. Renunciation is a central sun around which devotion, knowledge, and rest revolve around the planet. One must not hanker for the fruit of action for during in this known and unknown world. Service to this known world as a manifestation of Godhead will take everything that is necessary for salvation. So for him, karma yoga or service to humanity is the ultimate pathway of salvation. And he essentially accepts is that all religions have truth, but all of them have error as well. So you don't necessarily adhere dogmatically to the principle of individual religion, whatever that may be, as long as you understand underlying idea behind the religion. And Gandhi's sermon sort of summarizes feelings about religion. My religion is Hinduism, which for me is a religion of humanity and includes best of all religions known to me. So he's willing to accommodate himself with every other religion to extract everything that is good in all other religion. For him, that is the Hinduism. And Swami Chinmayanand, I think, he summed it very well. The average man looks up at night and sees thousands of twinkling stars, each different from other. But a man of wisdom perceives one light behind the dark dome of night sky, whose incandescence peeps through all those holes in the dome of night. So what he sees is that those stars are essentially the hole through which the central light percolates into us. So they are not necessarily different. There is one light that permeates through all those stars. And essentially that is the idea behind Hinduism, is that all different manifestations of one divinity, but the divinity is only one. There are thousands of manifestations across. So you pray any one of them, ultimately you reach the final destination of one divinity. That's a prayer that we use, lead me from untruth to truth, darkness to ignorance, and death to immortality. Right. And these are some of the well-known temples in New Delhi, South India, Indonesia. This is one in Houston. Okay. This is important that I wanted to mention. Does anyone of you eat dog meat? Does anyone of you eat horse meat? If the answer is no, why? Because dog is a animal that you love.
Yeah.
When one sees Lord Krishna sitting with the cows and enjoying cows, helping, bringing the milk, doing the work in the field, and Lord Krishna and cow are sitting like this, would I ever want to eat a cow? The reason we don't eat cow, the reason we are praying cows is because there is an emotional connection to the story of how cow and Lord Krishna were together. There is a common livelihood that is derived from cows. And that is the reason Hindus don't eat cows. It has nothing to do with superstition. Just like no one eats dog meat in America. They often call meat dog hot dog. They don't eat dog. The reason is simple. We don't because there is emotional connection. This is a temple in Austin. These are some of the celebration.
Austin.
Holi is a celebration that is common in India. And this is Diwali, which is the ultimate triumph of good over evil, and the new year follows that. So this is a picture of that. And I think that covers
Hinduism
in general.
Very nice.
Okay. So at least last
Very well.
part I said like I'm talking to an American audience, right? Hopefully.
How
Yeah.
much
Yeah.
time do you have?